Welcome to the Grail Standard with Sir Vane. Today's episode is called Deception. The reason that it's called Deception is because I wanted to talk about the deception that we see in the real world. If you were to think, so right now in the world as it stands, there seems to be conflict with three, I suppose you could call, mainstream groups. You have Westerners, you have the Jews in Israel, and you have the radical Islamists, right? And the thing is, if you look historically, for instance, if you were to ask most people about fascism and communism and America, you would think that the communists and the fascists and the Nazis were complete enemies of each other, right? That they would never collaborate at all. But historically, especially if you read Anthony C. Sutton's books, you'll actually see that historically, Wall Street financed both. The same people who financed Hitler were the same people who financed the communists in Russia. You actually see collaboration between Woodrow Wilson gave Trotsky a special passport to make his way to Russia, and when Trotsky was on his way to Russia from New York, he was actually arrested by the Canadian police, and it was intimated that they let Trotsky go because Woodrow Wilson wanted it. Now you might ask a question, what's going on here? Why would Woodrow Wilson, a Democratic president of the United States, be collaborating with a communist? Why would this happen? It's because this whole idea of us versus them is nothing new. Okay? I'm going to refer to the 20th century simply because that's where the majority of my knowledge is at. In today's world, it seems to me that the battle lines are drawn, right? We have, on the one side, we have the Republicans, who consists of mainly Caucasians, or what people call Caucasians, and Jews. And on the other hand, we have the left, which consists of communists and Islamists, right? Calling every Muslim is an Islamist is not what I'm getting at here, but you have radical Islamists on the same side as the communists, right? Now, and in the right wing, right? Supposedly there are neo-Nazis. Now, this isn't actually 100% true. The neo-Nazis, or what people call the alt-right, don't really have the financial backing of these other institutions, of these other groups. But it's very interesting, because you would think that the communists in the left of America and the radical Islamists would be at odds with each other. Because the radical Islamists, I mean, when 9/11 occurred, I'm pretty sure that Al-Qaeda released a press release to say that one of the reasons that the attack happened was obviously because they didn't like banks. Usury is a bad thing. Usury is a term that refers to the lending of money at interest. It used to be in Christianity. It used to be seen as a sin. But it's very interesting, but I'm going to move on. But what was actually interesting was one of the reasons that Al-Qaeda said that they attacked the United States was because Americans allow gay people in their societies. This was on their press release. And it's very commonly known that the radical Islamists, they don't like gay people. They like to oppress women as well, but they don't like gay people. So it raises a question of, why would radical Islamists be cooperating with communists who hate Christianity, but also I believe that all human beings have rights, okay? But the left is traditionally known, or when I say traditionally, within the last 20 years, known as the defenders of gay rights. So why would a group of people who are obsessed with gay rights be collaborating with another group of people that don't believe in gay rights? So at first, you would be like, this is insane. This doesn't make sense. These people should be at odds with each other. Why are they working together? And then you look on the right, and you have America, and not just on the right, but you have like this idea of it's become almost like the new Crusades, Christianity versus Islam, where you have Republicans on the right, whether they're Republicans or not, who are, it's almost, well, not really Republicans, but it's almost being framed as a religious conflict, right, between, say, Christians and Muslims, that like the Christian way of view is better than the Muslims, and that's the reason why that's the reason why the conflict exists. If you go on Audible, you will see numerous authors like Glenn Beck, Raymond Ibrahim, who say that the problem is Islam, right? And then if you look on the other side, you will have people who say that no, Islam is a religion of peace. But you also have the same thing going back and forth. Like, it's like, in order for chivalry to have its place, we need to be able to identify, right? If we're going to act in a chivalrous way, we need to be able to identify who are, this is going to sound like simplistic, but we need to identify who the good guys are, right? We need to identify who is it that we're going to follow? Who is it that we're going to support? But the reality, it's not like in the comic books where it's really simple, where Captain America deals with Hydra. Hydra are the bad guys. They're simplistically bad guys. You don't really need to think about it too much. But real life is often not like this at all. I have been, and this conflict seems to stem back to the Israel-Palestine conflict, right? And this is a topic that I've been looking into for the last 20 years. And this is a topic that I have to be honest, as someone who has been researching it for a very long time, who has read Jimmy Carter's book, Peace Not Apartheid, who has listened to the son of the Hamas writer, it's almost impossible to be an outsider looking in and to determine what is the truth in this situation, right? How am I supposed to make sense of reality, right? Because every time that I read a book by one side or the other, it seems to me that I learn something about what one side is doing. And then when I read another book, I learn another side, what the other side's doing. But it raises the question, what's really going on here? I mean, why is it so hard to get a simplistic answer on what is really happening here? And that really comes back to what I was talking about, deception, right? This channel is about chivalry, but whether you want to call them Satan, the military-industrial complex, or in the case of George Carlin, you say it's not really a professional conspiracy, it's just that interests align. However you want to phrase this, if we look back in history, as Anthony C. Sutton showed, Wall Street financed both Hitler and the communists of Russia. Now, why would they do this? These ideologies are competing with each other. Communism came first. Communism is the combination of internationalism and socialism. Nazism is a variation of communism, where instead of it being about international socialism, it's about the combination of nationalism and socialism, which is where the racial aspect comes into it. But they are similar to each other, right? They both believe in authoritarian governments. They normally get put on different pedestals. They normally get looked at as polar opposites, but they're really not. They're both examples of authoritarianism, right? But it raises a question. Why would the same people fund both Hitler and communism? Why would they do that? Well, it's really simple. The answer is they weren't really funding communism or fascism. They were funding what it would do, right? The end plan was to take away people's freedom and to create the police state. That is their goal. Whatever you want to call them, the military-industrial complex, whatever you want to call them, that is their end goal, right? I don't know how long they've existed for, right? But that's their goal, right? It's like Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, and that's 100% correct. It is eternal vigilance, the price of freedom, right? When you look at conflicts in the world, never forget this. Never forget that at one point in time, okay, fascism was the darling of the Democrats, and then later on they stopped being proponents of it, right? When it was no longer fashionable to be proponents of it. So the reality is, are these groups, are they really fascists like the left say? Are they really communists like the right say? Are they really radical Islamists like the Republicans say? Right? Or is it that we really don't know who they are or what their ideology is? Not directly, apart from the fact that we know that they are trying to take away people's freedom. And they will use any tool necessary to do so. As long as it achieves their ends, that's all that matters. They tried fascism and it failed. They tried communism and it failed, but it's still around. You could say communism failed, but actually it's come back, right? They don't care what ideology they use. And understand, if you're looking at the mainstream world and you're looking like what's happening with the Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK, where the military seems to be, where the United Kingdom, the government seems to be doing nothing about it. And then you think, oh, we need to fight the Muslims. And it's like, understand that this is a symptom of a problem that was created. For the reality is that even irrespective of what is the cause of why these grooming gangs are occurring, the fact of the matter is, right, if these people in the grooming gangs had prior records, and they very well may have, and it wasn't just those individuals, those Muslims that were orchestrating this, it was the police in the UK who were helping them, right? The numerous reports of the police laughing about the victims and calling them packy shaggers, right? What is going on here? The police's job is to protect the civilians, right? And to enforce the law, right? What is the point in having laws? So the point I'm getting at here is that everyone's focused on the symptom, but they're not looking at the grand picture here. They're not looking at the bigger picture. They're only focused on the here and now, which is dealing with the threat in front of them. They're not really thinking about, hang on a minute here for a second, why did the police do nothing? Why did the police know about it for so long? It's easy to turn around and to say that political correctness is the reason, but I don't think that's the case at all. Because this is not the first time in history where so-called opposing sides have collaborated with each other to create an end goal. The end goal is to take away people's freedom. The end goal is to create the police state. And they are trying to do whatever it is they need to do, and they will use any resource and any ideology that achieves that objective. So, before we start thinking about launching a crusade against Muslims, we need to sort of understand that, one, like in any war, there are innocent civilians that have nothing to do with this that could be dragged along into this. So that's the important thing. Like it says in the old code, it's about defending the weak, even when they're on an opposing side. It's I don't mean opposing in that way, but I mean like if there are radical Islamists, the opposing side, right? Even if you think that they're opposite to you or they're breaking the law, right? Always remember that throughout history, especially when you're talking about the 20th century, let's look at Germany, right? So before Germany became a dictatorship, right? If we go back in the day, right, when people talk about terrorists nowadays, the communists were the terrorists of the early 20th century. In Germany, at the time, in Germany in 1910, I believe it was I think it was 1917 actually. I can't remember if it was 19, I think it was when the Weimar Republic was put in. So I think it was 1910, could be off about this, but it was before World War One had took place. So I can't remember. It was just before, because the Weimar Republic was put in after this essentially. So there was a communist group in Russia, in Germany, called the Society of the Red Flag, or the Order of the Red Flag, or something along those lines, that attempted to do a communist overthrow in Germany. Now they failed because of the secret police in Germany, right, or the special forces of the army. But this scared the president of Germany so much that he left and he never came back. And then afterwards, the Weimar Republic was put in. Now, the Weimar Republic was supposed to be a government put in until something more permanent could be put in. So the point is, there was a real communist threat in Germany, right? There was an attempted communist uprising. It actually happened. It's a documented fact that it happened, right? But there's a couple of ways that you can look at this, right? So then why is this important? This is important because this is one of the things that was used by the Nazis to get in power. So the Nazis I think they were established around about 1910, or at least they were around in 1910, but nobody was taking them seriously. Then World War One happens, and the Society of the Red Flag tries to overthrow Germany. They fail. But it was a genuine attempted coup on Germany. Communist coup. So the communists they were very real, right? I'm pretty certain that they believed what they were doing. But what if they were meant to fail? What if their job was to fail was because somebody wanted to try fascism in Germany, and they needed to stroke the fire, and so maybe they hired the Order of the Red Flag to do this, right? In order to institute a fascist regime, or maybe the Order of the Red Flag, maybe it was an actual attempted coup, right? And it failed, and it wasn't supposed to fail, but by financing both the communists and the fascists, they made certain that Germany was going to become a police state, irrespective of how. If the Society of the Red Flag had managed to overthrow Germany, it would have become a police state. And if the excuse to use the Society of the Red Flag's attempted coup to put in a different type of police state, that's still a win-win. So that's the way that you have to look at this. You have to look beyond what you're seeing up front, and you have to understand who's financing all of this, right? Somebody's financing this, right? You know, somebody's financing all the things that are happening in the world, right? There's a reason why the mainstream media in America won't talk about the grooming gangs, right? Because it's their agenda for this to happen. This is the reason why they don't talk about it. You can turn around and say political correctness, but is it? Is it political correctness? To lie? I mean, no, because it suits their agenda. So understand, when you're looking at a problem, be careful about getting fired up about something, because understand that you could be being manipulated into doing something by people who are using you and whatever ideology that you have to spread their police state, because that's the end goal for them. So this was the end of the Grail Standard. I'm going to move on the next episodes back to talking about regular chivalry, but I wanted to make people understand, like Father Bailey Spiridion said, whichever side you support, always be skeptical. Don't take things at face value. As somebody who's been looking into the Israel-Palestine conflict for years, it's not as simple as people are making it out to be. You know, it's quite complicated, because it's a conflict that's been raging for over 100 years, I think, at this point. So it's important to understand that the instinct for Christians will be to fight back against Muslims, especially the Christians in the UK. But they have to look. I'm not saying that the rape gang should be happening, but they need to sort of look beyond and say, well, did the government do nothing about this? It's easy to turn around and say political correctness, but it doesn't explain the question of maybe this was the plan. Maybe they're starting with Europe, and next they're gonna try to start with America, and they're gonna try to take the guns away from America, because if they take the guns away from the Americans, it makes them easier to take over. So this was the Grail Standard with Sir Yvain. Thank you for watching.